Hey everyone, my name is Allie and welcome to my channel, and today I'm going to be talking about the books that I read in June. So June wasn't exactly a very good reading month. Is anyone really surprised? I don't know why, just June did not work for me. June was not happening and I just couldn't get myself to read, even though it was the Biblio Games, even though I did so well in the Biblio Games back in February. Just for some reason, June was not my month. Even though it was Pride Month, I should have been feeling great, but I wasn't, and reading just wasn't gonna happen. So I did end up reading 3 books, and I think one of them was an audiobook, one of them was a library book, and one of them is a reread. So the first book that I read in June was A Wicked Thing by Rhiannon Thomas, and I read this as an audiobook and I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. Basically, it's a Sleeping Beauty retelling, so there's not much to talk about there. I think it was published back in around 2014 or 2015, so it's a little older, but I did really enjoy it. Even though I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars, I mostly did that because it wasn't really the quality that I expect now from fantasy books. And there were kind of some like really predictable parts, some parts that were just really boring, and it just wasn't like a really great fantasy, and definitely doesn't compare well to the 4 and 5 star fantasies that I've read now. However, it was a super fun and enjoyable read, and it was a super fast audiobook. I think it's maybe around 8.5 hours, so I got it done pretty fast. And I was able to read it while I was traveling in the beginning of June, so that was really nice, but overall it was just kind of like a so-so book. I don't really have any like super passionate feelings about it. I don't know if I'm gonna go to the sequel or not. I think it was just kind of a fun book to read, and it was super cute, and I like the main character. And I think that there are some really interesting points in the book, especially since there were some kind of more feminist themes within this retelling, especially since Sleeping Beauty isn't a super feminist fairy tale anyway. It was kind of nice to see some of those elements thrown in there. The next book that I read was the sequel to The Queen's Rising, and that is The Queen's Resistance, and I gave that a 5 out of 5 stars. I really loved it. I think that this is one of my new all-time favorite fantasy books ever. It's just so good. Like, it's so richly plotted, the characters are so amazing, it's not super heavy on the romance, so if you're looking for a fantasy book, especially a YA fantasy that doesn't really focus on romance at all, it's a super small subplot, then you're really gonna like The Queen's Rising. This series is just so beautiful, the writing is gorgeous, and I really love the way that the 2 books work together. It really works well as a duology. Even though I wish that there were more books, I really feel like it was perfect for a duology. The first book, The Queen's Rising, feels like one half of the story, and The Queen's Resistance feels like the other half, which is super nice, and I just really love this series. I'm so glad that I was able to read it, and I'm so glad that my library had the second book, because I was not about to spend any money on a sequel at this moment in time. Haven't really been buying too many books lately, so I just couldn't really justify spending money on a sequel, even one that I really wanted. So I'm glad that my library came in clutch with that, and I really did love it. So I totally recommend this series. I totally recommend this duology. It's just so beautiful. It's so beautifully written, and it's so underhyped on BookTube and Book Twitter. Like, almost no one talks about it, so I'd love to see more people read it and see more people kind of get hyped about it, because it's such a good story. The next book I read was my reread, and that was Stalking Jack the Ripper by Carrie Maniscalco, and I love this book so much. Another 5 out of 5 stars. Rereading it was like a completely different experience, and it was an experience that I loved, and I want to reread it again and again and again. I love these characters, and it was so fun getting to see them on the page rather than listening to them as an audiobook, because that's how I read the book the first time around, and the second time around while I was rereading it, I did read it physically because I own it now, and I just loved it so much. Audrey Rose is amazing. Thomas Cresswell is just mind-boggling amazing, and I love him so much. Just the way that he kind of like nags at Audrey Rose, and like their kind of banter between each other is just incredible. It's top notch. Nothing else beats their banter. I love them as like a duo, as friends, as a couple. They work so well together. And I'm definitely going to be rereading Hunting Prince Dracula, and I'm just so ready to get into this book and to, you know, revisit these two characters that I love so much. And I really hope that getting to read this book physically is gonna be an amazing and incredible experience, because I did read it as an audiobook the first time around, and I'm just so ready to get into this book because it's my favorite one of the series. Hunting Prince Dracula is like a cut above the rest, and it's just one of my favorite sequels of all time, and I cannot wait to read it. And you guys need to pick up this series like yesterday. It is so good. It's so good, and like, oh my gosh, it's just amazing. The audiobooks are absolutely perfection. So if you want to get into this series but don't really want to like read them physically, because there are some kind of graphic pictures within the books, I would totally recommend reading the audiobook, because you don't get those graphic pictures if that's something that's maybe unsettling or triggering to you. And when I say graphic, I really mean graphic. Like, there were some pictures in there that I had to like put my hand over because I couldn't look at them. So when I say graphic, I mean graphic. So just keep that in mind when you're going to go into this series if you're going to read it physically. Remember, there's some graphic images. This is a book about gore and death and murder, so there are some pretty graphic images, like I said. So maybe read the audiobook instead, because the audiobooks are absolute perfection, top-notch quality. So those were all the books that I read in June. Now on to the books that I'm going to read in July, and I've already finished 3 books in July, which is just kind of amazing. I'm already going to surpass what I read in June, which is so good. The first book that I finished in July was Red, White, and Royal Blue, which I am pretty sure that I've already put out a video about this book. So if you haven't seen that, go watch it. You'll see all my thoughts about it. I did rate it 3 out of 5 stars. And then the next book that I read was The Vacationers by Emma Straub, and I rated that 3 out of 5 stars as well. It seems like the beginning of July is a 3 out of 5 star month. And then the next book that I read, I just finished today, and that is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. I'm gonna put it up on the screen so you can see what the author's name is, but I really enjoyed this book. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars, and that's all I want to say about it until my wrap up later on in the month. So there are a couple books that I'm currently reading, like We Hunt the Flame and Reunited, and a couple other books that I'm just like in the middle of. I'm not really gonna make a TBR for July. It just doesn't feel right for me this month. I kind of just want to play it by ear. I might read The Sorcery of Thorns because I really love Margaret Rogerson's work. And I feel like that's all I have to say about June and July. I just was super disappointed in myself for June. It just didn't feel like I was like my reading self. So I really want to get back into that. I really want to continue reading. And even though I'm like super close to my goal, which is 60 books this year, I just want to kind of keep up that momentum of reading, even if I do surpass my Goodreads goal, which I feel like I will pretty soon. I still want to, like I said, keep up that momentum. I want to keep reading. So if you guys have any recommendations, let me know. If you guys see anything in my background or ever in my videos that like you're like, hey, you should read that, let me know, because I would really love to know which ones I should kind of start. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, go ahead and give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel. Also go ahead and follow my Instagram, Twitter, and Goodreads, and I will see you all in my next video. Peace.